Welcome to the show. If you love books about vampires, you're going to love this next author. His name is Lou Hernandez. He wrote the book called The Curse of the Cobalt Moon and the Cobalt Moon's Fury. Welcome, Lou.
Hi, Susan. Nice to be with you.
It's nice to have you here. My goodness, what an interesting twist to vampire books. Let's talk about just the overall book message.
I think the main message of the book, of the story, Susan, is about choices, making the right choices. We all have, during the course of our lives, important decisions to make. And I think it's imperative that we think things through and ultimately make the best choice, the best decision we can, because those decisions are not only going to affect the course of our lives, but also many times will affect the lives of those closest to us, whether indirectly or directly. So I think that's the main message that the average reader can relate to.
What makes your book different as far as the vampires go? What are the two different classes of vampires, and how is that different?
What I'm exploring in my story is a new spin on the culturally popular genre of vampires, and that spin is half vampirism. And most of the characters in my book are half vampires, and the story deals with two groups of half vampires. One group is called the docile half vampires, which are the children produced from the union of a vampire father and a human mother. And there's another group of half vampires in the story called hostile half vampires, which are the offspring of a mother and a human father. The docile half vampires, they want to pursue their humanity, whereas the hostile half vampires have a completely different bloodlust nature. They want nothing more than to become full vampires at the appointed time. And therein lies the conflict that drives the story, the clash between the two groups, the good versus evil. So the protagonist of our book belongs to the docile half vampire group. And these hostile half vampires, I mentioned they want to become full vampires. They can only do this on the night of the seventh cycle of the Cobalt moon. Now, for the purposes of our book, the Cobalt moon is a blue moon, which occurs every 2.5 years.
Okay.
Blue moon is when there's two full moons in one calendar month. And that only happens every 2 years and 7 months to be exact. So the ages of all the teenage vampires in my story are between 16 and 18, because the seventh cycle would fall between those age groups, depending on how old they were when they experienced their first Cobalt moon cycle.
Wow.
And as I mentioned, the protagonist is part of the docile half vampire group, and he's also involved in an atypical love triangle. And I say atypical because it's not your usual two guys pursuing the girl. It's more like she loves him, he loves her, and she loves someone else love triangle. So there's heavy doses of unrequited love involved, which truthfully I think is more typical, more realistic to that age group of young love than the other type of love triangle we usually see.
I agree.
And finally, there's our villainess of the story, who is a vampire mother. In the story, there's a supernatural order of things which prevents the vampire parents from interfering with their children's rite of passage, so to speak. And but we have this one outlier, this villainess, this mother vampire, who disregards all protocol and wants nothing more than to facilitate her children. She's the mother of a hostile half vampire boy and girl, and she wants nothing more than facilitate their rite of passage to follow in her footsteps to full vampirehood. And so she's involved in the confrontation, which takes place over a week's time. It's builds up with the skirmishes, let's say, between the two groups, and then the final big battle comes on the night of the Cobalt moon. So
there's so many things that we can relate as humans to this. We hear about a mother-in-law with goals for her own children, or maybe not a mother-in-law, but a mother with goals for her own children, teenage, really true type of romance, how it happens. It's messy, it's confusing, and yet we have good and bad. And I think the overall like moral is we can choose. I mean, we're born into something that maybe pulls us in a direction, but we still have the right to choose what we want to fulfill in our life, right?
Ultimately fulfillment. Yep, that's correct.
Wow. So Lou, where do the two books, where does the Cobalt Moon's Fury pick up from the Curse of the Cobalt Moon?
Right. The Cobalt Moon's Fury is the sequel book to the Curse of the Cobalt Moon. I know usually with this type of genre, there's trilogies involved most of the time, but I was able to finish the story in 2 books, and I thought it'd be a disservice to try and stretch it out to 3 books to the reader. I think it's a tighter story in 2 books. So that's where the Cobalt Moon's Fury is the sequel book to the Curse of the Cobalt Moon.
What does the story, where does it pick up from one to another without giving away much of the story?
It's, as I mentioned, the story of the 2 books take place over a 7-day period. So the Curse of the Cobalt Moon takes place from Monday to Friday.
Okay.
And then in the story, it's Saturday night. The Curse of the Cobalt Moon's Fury picks up Saturday night, which is the night of the Cobalt Moon, where as the climactic ending comes in with the mother vampire I mentioned, and the 2 factions actually being head to head, so to speak.
I love it. And what inspired you to write this book?
I had written previously several baseball histories and biographies, and I wanted to expand the scope of my writing, broaden my literary horizon, so to speak. And so I chose this culturally popular genre of young adult fantasy fiction. And I have a preteen nephew and a teenage niece that I wanted to write something for. And through the publication of these 2 books, I was able to dedicate 1 book to each of them. So that was personally gratifying for me.
I love it. Well, we've got all your information. Lou Hernandez. Definitely go to Amazon, go to the places where these books are available, read them, purchase them, and give Lou a rating because it helps authors so much. Lou, thank you for joining us today, and congratulations on both the books.
You're welcome. My pleasure.